Okay, so now that we have the unit circle completed, now we're going to put it to use. If you haven't made your unit circle, then make sure you go back and watch that video and get that done, since we'll reference that a bunch. Okay, so here are our learning targets. And what is the unit circle? How do we use it? Well, first, the thing that I want to talk about is when we type something into our calculators, we actually get a value. Where do these values come from? Well, sine of 60 degrees, let's type it into our calculator. So I'm going to pull up my calculator. I need to make sure it's in degrees, so I'm going to do that. And now I'm just going to type sine of 60 degrees. I press enter, and I get 0.866025, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now where the heck does that value come from? Well, we looked on our unit circle. Now, we filled this out last time, and if you remember, sine is, let's use a better color than that, sine is y. So in our unit circle, the sine of 60 degrees is actually, sine of 60 degrees then is y value, and that's the square root of 3 over 2. Now, if I type that into my calculator, you'll notice square root of 3 divided by 2. Now notice I get the same thing. So these values that are already entered into your calculator come from somewhere. They come from the unit circle. That's where all these are derived. So when we're finding these things, that's where all this comes from, and that's where these numbers come from when you type them into your calculator. So how do we use our unit circle? Well, a lot of times they're going to ask for exact values. So if they ask for an exact value, then I have to have this. I can't have 0.866, okay? But that's how we use our unit circle. Okay, so we are going to do that. This is the one that I filled out last time. You may want to think about making your X and Y's different colors so you don't get confused. It's up to you. And also remember, sine is y in the unit circle. It's really y over r, but since our radius in the unit circle is 1, that ends up being y. And cosine is x. And then tangent is y over x. And I kind of color coded these so I don't make a mistake. Okay, so now sine of 30 degrees. Well, once again, sine is y. So I'm going to look at my unit circle and look at the y value at 30 degrees. So here's 30 degrees. I have x and y. Y is right there. So this means sine of 30 degrees, the exact value is 1/2. Okay, well that's pretty easy. All right, now we also talked about radians. Now remember, radians are another way to measure an angle. We have degrees and we have radians. And radians are usually represented in terms of pi. Cosine of 5 pi over 4, well, if I look at my unit circle here, 5 pi over 4 is the same as 225. Now cosine, we said cosine, right, is x, okay? Right, that's x. So if I look here at 5 pi over 4, my x value is negative square root of 2 over 2. So that's negative square root of 2 over 2. So that would be the exact value. I don't want to type it into my calculator. That's not exact. All right, so tangent of 300. So usually if you have sine or cosine, it's not going to be too tricky, but tangent sometimes requires a little bit more work because you have to divide. So tangent 300, well, 300 is right here, okay? So I have these two values, okay? Now, tangent is, as you recall, y over x. So this means I'm going to have to take negative square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. So let's do that. I'm going to write that. Negative square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. Now, to fix this, a lot of times you want to maybe write it in the old school form so you can do your math. Divided by 1/2. Now, if you remember, how do we divide fractions? We actually multiply by the reciprocal. So we change this to negative square root of 3 over 2 times 2 over 1. Okay, well, I like to cancel on the diagonals here. You can do that, reduce on the diagonals. If you don't remember that, you could also just multiply across the top and the bottom. That's how it works. You would get negative 2 root 3 over 2. Then you would reduce this, the 2's would reduce or cancel out, and I would end up with negative square root of 3. So you notice I have a little more work here to do, but tangent of 300 degrees is actually equal to negative square root of 3. Okay, so that's how, hopefully that's how you remember how to divide fractions. Okay, always make sure your answers are completely simplified, simplest radical form, all that stuff. All right, let's see, cosecant of pi, cosecant. So now remember, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So sine is y, or y over 1. So that means cosecant would be 1 over y. So I want to keep that in mind. All right, so pi, let's see, is right here. So sine is the y value, so that'd be 0, right? That would be sine of pi equals 0. But I want the reciprocal of that, so that means I'm going to have to put it 1 over y. Well, what's 1 over 0? Remember, when I divide by 0, that's undefined. I can't do that. You'll get an error message on your calculator. So here, this is actually going to be, this will be 1 over 0, which is undefined, and that's what I'm going to write. So make sure you write this, not this, okay? Since my answer is actually undefined, it's not 1, I mean, it's 1 over 0, but you need to always simplify your answer. Okay, I hope that makes some sense. Secant of 225. So secant is the reciprocal of cosine. So remember to keep those things in mind. So this is going to actually be 1 over x, but if you want to find cosine first and then just flip it around, you could. So secant, let's see, of 225, secant, so reciprocal of cosine, so cosine is x, that's this one. So this would be, well, let's just write cosine 225 is equal to negative square root of 2 over 2. Now you need to take the reciprocal of that, so you're going to flip that around. So this would be equal to negative 2 over square root of 2. Okay, now that's cool, except I've got a square root in the denominator, so I'm going to fix that. And I would get negative 2 root 2 over 2. These would cancel, so this would be equal to negative square root of 2. Okay, cotangent 270. So tangent is, tangent of 270 would be y over x. So maybe it's easier to start with that if you want. Tangent 270 is equal, 270 is equal to y over x, which would be negative 1 over 0. So that means this would be 0 over negative 1. 0 divided by negative 1 is 0. I think 0 on the numerator is okay, whoops. But 0 on the denominator makes it undefined. All right, I hope that helps and you're kind of getting that, and that's how you use your unit circle. All right, the other kind of problem that you're going to get is to use your unit circle and what you know about the coordinate plane. So it says, suppose theta is an angle in standard position whose terminal side lies in the given quadrant. For each function, find the exact values of the remaining trig functions for theta. So they tell us what cosine is. We need to find the other ones. So cosine is negative 1/2, and it lies in quadrant 3. Okay, So quadrant 3 is this quadrant right here, right? Remember, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's also labeled on your unit circle. So I'm going to draw a triangle. Now, here's my radius. I have a point down here. Now, this is going to be theta. Okay. Another way to think about this is we're in quadrant 3. We've got an angle. You can just draw an angle in quadrant 3 and then make it a right triangle. So this is my angle, and then make it a right triangle. So now, there we go. Now, cosine of theta. Now remember, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And they tell us this is -1/2. Okay, well, adjacent would be, if I'm looking at this picture, would be 1, and hypotenuse would be 2. Now, one of these has to be negative. Now, the radius is always going to be positive, and the x value, since we're going to the left, that has to be negative. X is negative. Okay, now when we find our y value, it actually will also be negative because it's down, right? Quadrant 3, both x and y are negative. They have to be. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to have to figure out what is y, and we need to do the Pythagorean theorem to get there. So, okay. Let's say a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A, let's say, is -1. My other leg squared. My other leg is y. And my hypotenuse is 2 squared. Okay, so -1 squared is 1 plus y squared equals 4. Subtract 1 from both sides, I get this. And then if I take the square root of both sides, I get the square root of 3. Now, can I break this apart? Always make sure it's simplified. I can't break apart the square root of 3 any more than it already is. It is simplified as far as it's going to go. So square root of 3, that's this right here. So I'm going to put square root of 3 here. Okay, and now I have the information that I need to go ahead and do the rest. So I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, now I can write in a few of these values. I know what cosine is. It's -1/2. So let me just go ahead and put that in there right away. -1/2. Now I could flip this around and get secant right away. That's going to be then -2. Okay, so I've got 2 of my 6. Now let's do the other ones. So sine. Let's do sine. From this right here, sine is opposite. So that's going to be here over hypotenuse. There. So that's square root of 3 over 2. Okay, let's write that in there. Square root of 3 over 2. Now, if I flip that around, I would have 2 over square root of 3. Fix that. Get that radical out of the denominator. And I end up with, this would be 2 root 3 over 3. Okay. All right, now we just have 2 more. So tangent. Let's go back to our picture. From this theta, tangent would be opposite over adjacent. So opposite over adjacent. So square root of 3. Now, I did forget something, right? I need to remember that this is negative. So I'm going to go back and keep that in mind here. So when I do this, this should actually be negative, and so should this. Okay, that's important. And I forgot it. It's easy to forget sometimes. So now this one, tangent would be opposite, negative square root of 3 over -1. So this would be negative square root of 3 over -1 is just square root of 3. Now, if I flip those around, this would give me I want to fix that. Now that's going to be positive. So this would give me square root of 3, or a negative over a negative is positive. So I'm just going to take care of that right away. And we'd end up with square root of 3 over 3. Okay, and that's how you do those. Keep in mind the positives and negatives when you're here. And that's how you use your unit circle to help you out for all kinds of different things.